from the AirTech Heating Studios, a Born to Win media production. Welcome to the resurrection of Say It Like You See It.
Things are certainly heating up in the NFL offseason, and this is Say It Like You See It, where we're going to break down today everything going on between all of the teams that are looking for quarterbacks, teams that are looking to sign free agents, and teams that have no idea what they're doing. Like I said, this is Say It Like You See It. I am your host, Trace the Moose Moustakis, alongside my partner in crime, Quinn, Mighty Q, the Redmond himself. I am live from the heart of Packer country, and he seems to be a hot button topic. Mr. Aaron Rodgers with his darkness retreat. I'm going to welcome in Quinn here. Quinn, how's it going today, man?
Hey, we're rocking and rolling here in Fargo. We got a beautiful flurries outside. It's nice. It's cool and brisk and real chilling. It's not football weather at all, but it's always great football conversation weather.
It is great football conversation weather. We're going to have the draft here coming up in literally 1 week. So things in the NFL are continuing to stay hot, even though the weather is cold. The XFL has started. The USFL starts in 2 months. It's a really interesting time for football fans. And I say that because right now we're kind of in that like lull zone where we're not entirely sure what some quarterbacks are doing. We think we know what quarterbacks are doing. We think we know what teams are going to do. And then something always happens. There's a massive twist. Something goes completely haywire. And we have to talk about all the speculation that is going on right now in NFL free agency. I want to start with a couple of players, notably that we believe are going to be switching teams. And these four or five guys, I truly believe are going to end up on new teams this year. So we're going to start with the only non-quarterback in the list, a Mr. Saquon Barkley. Now, there are some reasons and some speculation as to why Saquon won't end up with the Giants, and we'll get into that in a second. But let me start with this. Where do you think Saquon ends up in the 2023-2024 season?
There's a lot of conversation and talks right now about how Saquon mentioned how he wants to play for the Bears. He was talking about Walter Payton, and it could be, hey, I want to get paid a bunch of money. They have the ability to do it. I think on the Bears side, it could be that they could package some other things that could actually lead to Saquon being the main guy in the backfield. And then you can have Montgomery or Washington as the second option. You can keep them as a third because they do actually have the cap space to just kind of overpay for, honestly, 2 years. And I don't entirely know if they're going to be able to pay with how much money they have. Them paying this year is a chance, but I think Saquon, it's a great chance he goes to the Bears. They can pay him a sizable amount of money. I think they can do it to where he could get paid kind of up front. So it would be initially as a cap hit to the Bears, but this year they've got so much it's not going to matter, that they can essentially pay him on a front-loaded contract that isn't probably going to have a lot of guaranteed money, but can have a fun, flashy sticker on it that can be filled with a ton of incentives. And it's going to work out both for Saquon, because if he stays healthy and he hits the things that he needs to hit, then it works out in his favor. He's going to get paid a bunch of money. And if he doesn't, then it works out in the Bears' favor, where it's like, hey, you only did XYZ thing. Here you go. It's still a lot of money. You still got paid kind of early up front on a front-ended thing. But it would work out actually in terms of best interest for both, because he would make the Bears slightly better. I just think that they would make another handful of moves that would then kind of set it over the edge, but that would be really good on the offensive side.
Yeah, and listen, if this was 2009, 2010, I would say this is a slam dunk. You need to go after Saquon and give him the max deal. Unfortunately, the game is now centered around quarterback play rather than great running back play. In fact, if you go back and look at all of the teams that made the playoffs, not every team had a Pro Bowl level running back. I mean, Miles Sanders, even though had a good regular season, kind of disappeared in the playoffs. I mean, before Christian McCaffrey came, the 49ers, they didn't really have a great running game. They had capable backs, but nothing great. Joe Mixon is like, I think right now he's kind of at that line. The Bills had no running game. So it's a great complementary piece. You're right. It's great on the offensive side. So if you're thinking about signing Saquon Barkley, yes, obviously anything helps, but he's maybe worth one, maybe two wins throughout the entire season. I mean, how often are you relying heavily on one running back? There's only one guy in the league, I truly believe, that is worth more than one win, and that's Derrick Henry. And that's because they let him touch the ball 30 times a game. Saquon, with his injury history, he's not built for that, especially in the cold weather. We've seen him miss considerable time. So he's not a running back that's built anymore to withstand 30 plus carries or 25 plus carries. He's more likely in the realm of like 15 to 20. And you probably throw in an extra 3 to 4 receptions during the game. So he's probably built for like 18 to 23 touches, somewhere in that ballpark. They don't need to be going after Saquon. I think they have a more than capable running game. Look, the Bears set a franchise record for most rushing yards in a single season. In fact, I want to say the Bears were very, very close to almost breaking the NFL record of most rushing yards in an entire season. So the running game was not the problem. And we saw how good the running game could be. David Montgomery was averaging almost 4 yards a carry. We don't even need to mention what Justin Fields can do with his legs. The running game's not the problem. It's the passing game that the Bears need to address. First of all, Justin Fields needs to get up and take the next step. Then you look at the receiving core. The receiving core, while I'll give you, was not the most inept thing we've ever seen. It wasn't good. And losing Darnell Mooney to injury and then Chase Claypool at the very end to injury, the Bears weren't working with much at the very end. So everyone wants to make a big deal about, this 10-game losing streak. Well, it probably wouldn't have been 10 games. The Bears were dealing with a ton of injuries in the latter half of the season. I'm talking like week 13 on. The Bears were just decimated with injuries. It probably wouldn't have been a 10-game losing streak. It probably would have been more like 7. But they started 8 rookies. They had all those injuries. The Bears were just completely depleted last year, and it was a throwaway season. Now, we're in the greatest spot probably that you could possibly be in with that number 1 overall pick and the leverage that we might gather from it. But in terms of getting Saquon and saying, hey, look, that's someone we actually want to go after, you're looking at maybe 1 tops 2 wins added on to a 3-12 record. So, or a 3-15 record. So I'm not entirely sure that's the smartest move.
Yeah, I just said it's gonna be more of a combo on stuff. I think that if the Bears get really, really aggressive in the offseason, I think in terms of how many pieces they can really start to mix and match and trade, and it becomes a leverage piece having those 2 guys, and those 2 backs are very valuable right now. And you can get a bunch in return for those guys and actually let Saquon, have a lot of that load and carry. And that's the reason I said front load his contract and just make it incentive based, because then you're really actually not paying him, but you are paying him only if you get the results. But then you have whichever guy you like better as a secondary backup, and it turns into like a Zeke and Pollard situation where we can, rather than letting it be a truly, hey, you go out and get a bunch of touches, you can evenly balance it out. You've got one guy who essentially still isn't really getting paid that much in terms of Washington, but like you can package a bunch and they can get a lot in return. But at the end of the day, it's like there's a lot of places he can go, but in terms of how much he's going to want, at the end of the day, wherever Saquon goes, I think if the team is smart, they're going to front load the contract and make it incentive based. Like that's plain and simple what it's going to be.
Correct. And I think what ends up needing to happen for the Bears is they need someone who, not that Saquon can't catch. Saquon has good hands, but he's definitely no Christian McCaffrey. He's no Alvin Kamara. The Bears need to try and find that sort of hybrid back. Maybe not to the level of Christian McCaffrey or Alvin Kamara, but they need to find someone who kind of fits that role. Someone like Miles Sanders, I feel like would do really, really well with the Bears. With the Bears offense right now. It helps Justin Fields get a little bit of breathing room so that rather than say, hey, look, we're going to have to make our reads down the field. If he's panicking and you can just dump that ball into the flat to like a guy with hands like Miles Sanders, that relieves a lot of pressure and eases the conscience of Justin Fields tremendously, especially for a young developing quarterback. So we need to be looking for a guy that can kind of do more with his hands, but can also shoulder 10 to 13 carries per game. So I think we need to be looking for a hybrid back in that sense. We're going to move on to the first of all the many quarterback speculations that we're dealing with. Let's start with the man that was released the other day by the Las Vegas Raiders, Mr. Derek Carr. Now, there were a lot of rumors about where Derek was going to go. A lot of people said the Colts were a viable option. That's been squashed. He met with the Saints. He's met with the Jets. And it really appears that there's only about 4 teams on this list that he would consider going to: the Saints, the Jets, the Titans, and I want to say it is the Panthers is the last one, but the Panthers is really, really low on the list. So let me ask you this: 23-24 season, where does Derek Carr end up?
I really think Derek Carr's most likely going to be wearing green. I think the Jets are, with all the Aaron Rodgers debacle stuff that he's going through at this point, he has relatively dealt with a handful of injuries the last few years that have relatively changed his game. Yes, you talk about 2 years ago in his MVP, but you really start to look at his play transpired over. It's been a lot of injuries sprinkled throughout. It's a lot of random little small things. Those small things only get bigger. It's not like he's exactly getting healthier as he gets older, and you have to deal with all the off the field issue. Derek Carr has never had a top 10 defense in any time that he's played as a Raider. He's brought them to the playoffs multiple times. He's had some ample talent put around him. He had a handful of times where he had nothing around him, and he was having a great MVP-like season, and then that's the year that he hurt his knee. And he's going to be around a great young roster. You have 2 highly young, capable, offensive, basically, essentially both were rookie of the year winners, but one got hurt. And so once that gets going, and they've already got the talent sprinkled throughout the entirety of the offense, and you're doing the same thing on defense, and it's a lot of that young energy. And Derek Carr is at the right age where he can come in and mesh with them and say, hey guys, like, I'm here to show up and win, and I believe in you guys because you're young, you're fresh, you're talented. I feel I can be the catalyst to make this thing work. The Saints, they're a dumpster fire. They're always now in this realm of, they still play in the NFC South, to where it's like, yeah, it's pretty viable. He probably could make them better of some sorts, but it's not really that great of a roster anymore. It's not that great of a coaching staff, and really, I feel like that would complement him well. I just feel it's a better situation in New York. He can be welcomed a lot more with open arms. It's a lot more win now and win not just this season. It can be, hey, you have this season, next season, and possibly a third season, depending on his health and what he does, for them to really kind of be pretty a viable team, especially in a very AFC East that I think the Bills are regressing with their cap space issues. If the Dolphins, it is going to depend on Tua, and with the Patriots, I mean, do we really trust Mac Jones and the debacle that we saw with them last year? So I think the Jets really got a chance if Derek Carr has the opportunities and pickings. I think he probably should pick that one.
Yeah, so I love that you mentioned the defense. Derek Carr is 1,000% marketing himself right now, not as an offensive threat, not as a guy that's going out and saying, hey, you need to buy my talent. What he's saying is, I can come in and be the most stable guy that you've ever seen. Do you remember when Alex Smith went to the Chiefs, and everyone knew when Alex got there, you weren't going to get flash. You weren't going to get rock star. You weren't going to get a 345-yard passing games with 4 touchdowns, no picks, and a perfect passer rating. You were going to get a guy that threw for 230 yards, 1 touchdown, maybe 2, no picks, and completed 70% of his passes. That's exactly what Robert Saleh and the Jets want from Derek Carr. And I believe you're right. I think he's going to end up as a Jet. I think they're looking at it and saying, look, you've never had a good defense. Our offense is loaded with talent. We've got a good offensive line. We've got good young receivers. We've got a great back who's going to come back healthy. He was on his way to winning Offensive Rookie of the Year. We have got the pieces that you're used to. All you need to do is go in and be an adult. Be an adult. Don't take any big swings. Manage the game. Game manager. It's one of those phrases that quarterbacks hate to hear because it basically means you're not talented enough to really, lift up an organization. But game manager can really be an excellent benefit to your game and the way that you present yourself. If you go in and say, look, you're not going to get more than 8 interceptions from me this season, but you're not going to get, 4,500 yards passing. You're going to get a guy that comes in, he's going to throw 25 touchdowns, he'll throw 6 picks, he'll have, just below 4,000 yards passing, he'll average 235, 238 yards per game. And he's just going to go in there. He's going to complete passes. He's going to make the right plays, make the layups, and he's not going to do anything that rocks the boat. And that's exactly what the Jets need, because if there was one thing that the Jets had last year, it was a lot of boat rocking, literally and figuratively, Mr. Zach Wilson.
That I got to give you that one. That is solid. Yes, I do think he is a slightly better game manager than Alex Smith, but to that credit, I think yes, it is a stable function of he is an adult that's in the room. He's a guy that's not going to, essentially come in and make things too much of an issue. But, like you said, it's anything that's too crazy. He can show up and get the job done. But, as a NFL quarterback, it's going to stay right around average, about 65% completion, get the job done. And with that young crew, it has a flourish in letting those guys be able to show their talent even more, being able to get them the football. And I think that's something that Zach Wilson able to do, whereas Carr would be able to do. But that's mine. So who else we got? Who's up next?
Before we get into the next guy, I'm going to put this out there. This is my hot take. I have, with Derek Carr being accepted by the Jets and him being in playing for the Jets next year, I have the Jets over under at win-loss at 10, and I would take the over. I think that think about this was a 7-win team last year, and they were a dumpster fire at quarterback. Horrendous. I mean, props off, hats off to Mike White. They acted like he was the second coming of Tom Brady mixed with Jesus Christ himself. And Mike White was quite literally maybe slightly better than Zach Wilson. He was just more mature. So, but the hype was real for Mike White for like 3 weeks. And it's like, dude, this is a guy that will be a career backup player. He's basically Nick Foles. So I have that over under if Derek Carr goes to the Jets at 10, and I'd take the over. I think they're a playoff team next year. Moving right along. This one should be kind of a slam dunk, but we do have to mention it. Daniel Jones is asking for $45 million. Where do you think Daniel Jones ends up next year? Is he playing for the old New York Football Giants, or does he go somewhere else?
It's pretty simple. Yes, he will be a Giant next year, based fully on the fact of he's going to be upset. And I think they threw this out there as a pure negotiation tactic later on that the Giants are going to counter with a lot lower of a number. So either he's going to sign a long, extension essentially with the Giants in the form of about probably $34 million a year. And I think that, the Giants come back initially, they're like, hey, we could franchise tag you, and they wouldn't give him an exclusive franchise tag. They should give him just the regular franchise tag, and it's going to be $32.5 million. And if a team comes along and says, hey, we want Daniel Jones, and the Giants are going to get the 2 draft picks for it, they will happily take the 2 draft picks, and they will move right along. It's not something that he's not a $45 million a year guy. I get the exclusive franchise tag right now is at $45 million, but he's, I think, as a negotiation to try to get their number up above the regular franchise tag number, because I think realistically to sign an extension where the Giants number is at right now is probably $30 or $31 million a year. So in terms of, hey, let me publicly ask for 15 more than I'm worth and have really shown an ability to play at, it's, hey, we'll give you $31 million a year, or we'll franchise tag you. If someone wants to give you more money, go ahead, let him give you more money. But he's going to be a Giant next year, I think, on the franchise tag, because I think his firing and rehiring of an agent and then asking for $45 million, he might be in a mental state that he's going to try to refuse, even $37 million if they try to give him on the high side. But he's probably going to end up on the franchise tag at $32.5 million a year. I mean, he should be a smart guy. He went to Duke, so.
Well, so here's what I do understand. I'm going to play devil's advocate for a slight moment, even though I don't think it's much of an argument. The going rate for the market of quarterbacks, right? Because not everyone is Mahomes. Not everyone can command that type of money, even Dak Prescott. And that's probably what Daniel Jones is looking at. He's looking at Dak Prescott. He's looking at guys that he believes that he's comparable to, and saying, well, if I can go out and get as close to 45 as I don't think he's going to actually look at it and say, I want 45 or I'm walking. Like, I'm sure he's using that as leverage for them to bargain down. Here's my issue. Daniel Jones last year, I want you to take a guess for me. Out of 32 qualifying starting quarterbacks that played more than, say, 9 games with yards per game, can you tell me what place Daniel Jones fell in terms of yards per game as a quarterback last year?
He's not last because Justin Fields is last.
Correct.
But I want to say if he's not second to last, he's in the bottom 4 to 5 guys in the league, because he only threw for more than 230 yards 3 times. It was against the Vikings twice, and it was against the Lions. All 3
Correct.
who had terrible defenses. So I'm going to lock in with bottom 3 in the league, but I know he wasn't dead last.
He wasn't dead last. You're right. Justin Fields was last, but Daniel Jones was second to last. He averaged 200 yards per game last year in 2023 in a quarterback-centric league. That does not a $45 million man make.
But here's the only argument that he has. But we won a playoff game.
But here's what I would argue.
There's a lot of quarterbacks that can't say that, though, which is why I say, Daniel, here's $32.5 million on a franchise tag. If you think another team is going to pay you the contract money you want, go ahead, please.
No, hell, here's I would even go one step further. I would say we're going to franchise tag you. We're going to give you the non-exclusive deal. We're going to give you $32.5 million a year. You're not going to have Saquon, your ultimate safety net. We still have no wide receivers. Go out and play quarterback. Bring us back to the playoffs. And if you can do that, if you bring us back to the playoffs next year, then we'll sign your $45 million a year. He can't do it. We've seen, 6 years? What is he going into his sixth?
Which, to that though, if Daniel Jones stays, and so he gets the non-exclusive franchise tag, he gets the guaranteed of $32.5 million for next year, and no guaranteed contract money after that. He goes out. He takes the Giants back to the playoffs. He wins a wild card game again. With the roster that they currently have, and if pieces left, if he was able to do that, I would 100% give him $45 million a year.
Of course. That's what I just said. Yeah.
Because, and here's why, I think he actually has the ability to do it, because the fact that he just did it this year, it does paint a picture of Brian Daboll has cleaned it up, and another year and the ability to have him be, because we've seen him break out and have some athletic runs. He's not Josh Allen, but he's the slightly less athletic version of him. His arm isn't as strong, but he's still a big guy that has a very strong arm. He's quick, but he's not Josh Allen fast.
Correct. And
he's
I'll give
not
you this.
that elusive. But if he goes out and he has the bit, all he has to do is just not make the mistakes. And against the bad teams, he's going to be good enough to win, which is why he's going to be an average, but $45 million a year next year. I'm okay with that, because that's the franchise tag exclusive for this year. So that would be a win.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's exactly what I just said. If he can go out next year and lead them back to the playoffs, I would give him his $45 million. I totally would. But here's what I'll say. On the side of Daniel Jones, if I'm Daniel Jones and his new agent or whomever is representing him now, I would say, look, no one has known how to use me properly until Dayball got to New York. And the first year that I was used the way that I know that I can be used and utilized the way I should be, we made the playoffs. So the only time we had a competent head coach in there that knew exactly what my skill set was, I was able to lead this team to a playoff win. So I understand where he's coming from. He's not looking at the first 5 years, the first 4 years. He's looking at now, like this last year, going forward. So I understand where his head's at. But unfortunately, the only body of work that we've ever seen from Daniel Jones is what we've already seen in the past and last year with his 200 yards per game. So I think you're right. The Giants are going to say, look, we're going to franchise tag you. You're going to get that guaranteed money. Now you got to go out and show us what you can do. Now you got to earn that contract.
And here's the one thing that I'll say. What if he has a Joe Flacco type year when the Ravens franchise tagged him and then he went on and won a Super Bowl? What it like if they because their defense isn't bad.
No, it's
quite good, actually.
It's actually a top 10 defense. I would say it's more closer to 10, but it is a top 10 defense.
Which, let's say next year they run it back and they're the 7th ranked defense, but they get a couple pieces with him on offense, and he's a motivated guy in a franchise. Like, we want to talk about it, giving a guy motivation. Joe Flacco did it. If Joe Flacco could win a Super Bowl on a franchise tag, Daniel Jones has actually more skill set, being more athletic. So I'll just dangle that little out there as hey, if it happens, I did go ahead and say that this is a thing that could happen as a predictability. He has more athletic ability than Joe Flacco. So don't be shocked if the Giants go on a run next year. But
I'm happy you brought up Joe Flacco. Daniel Jones has not really had a comp. Like, I know you just said, like, he's a less athletic version of Josh Allen. But I would argue also he's a slightly more athletic version of Joe Flacco. So that's a very interesting draw. I really like that you had that. I might put that on a t-shirt. That is a really great comp. He's like right in the middle of those two. All three of them have good arms. Josh just has the legs of a lion or a gazelle, and Joe Flacco has the mobility of a rock. So
yeah.
All right, let's move on. We're going to move on to the guy that just came out of his darkness isolation retreat. We're in the heart of Packers country here in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. The speculation, I got to tell you, every time I walk into a bar or a restaurant, everybody is talking about Aaron Rodgers. And how sick they are of Aaron Rodgers and that they just wish he would go. I'm telling you, that's how most Packers feel. So let's just throw it out there. Aaron Rodgers, where does he end up in the 2023-2024 season?
He's going to end up, I think the Packers will find a way to get him out of the building because I think, like you said, they're done with him. They don't want to deal with it. I think the Raiders are the best option. They are the one that him just going and playing with Davante Adams again is really all that's needed, because there was a couple years there where he didn't give any young talent any type of consideration playing in Green Bay. But together. If there's a real chance make something work, there's a chance he goes there. But the problem and issue on that is it's the AFC West. You have to play Patrick Mahomes twice. You have to play Herbert twice. And a guy who I think is going to be drastically light years better next year, Russell Wilson, twice. That is a tough ask for a Raiders team that is probably the 4th best roster in that division. He would be going into the much tougher quarterback division in the AFC. It's the best decision for the Packers. It is the place where he can go and he can be successful and he can be flashy and he can put up a lot of good numbers, but it's the place where he's not going to succeed. It's a place where he might have a borderline MVP season, but he's not going to have any chance at winning a Super Bowl. And he's not going to have any chance at, making any headway and ruining anything for the Packers. So I think they find a way to get him to the Raiders because it works out best for them and it gives them the cleanest. Yep. See ya, Aaron. You go have fun playing with Devontae. Like, good luck. Take your darkness to the dark hole.
Correct. Now, the Raiders makes a lot of sense, and it's probably the leading candidate for where he's going to end up. But I'm going to throw out another team, and it's probably going to make you shake your head at first. But when you hear why I think this team is a dark horse contender, it actually makes a lot of sense. So what is one thing that Aaron Rodgers hates more than young receivers and guys that don't know what they're doing? Aaron Rodgers hates people talking negatively about Aaron Rodgers. He doesn't like going to, facing the media with all the scrutiny and all. Like, Aaron Rodgers wants to be viewed upon as a god, as someone, this football giant, this football entity that is just better and bigger than everyone around him. And for a long time in Green Bay, that's what he got. Because when Aaron was in his prime, there was always somebody else's fault. It was always the defense. It was always the coaching. It was Mike McCarthy's fault. And then it was, well, then they don't have any more receivers now, and it's only Devontae. So what could Aaron do with only one weapon? And it was the special teams for a long time. But here's what I'll say. The last 2 years that Aaron Rodgers has been playing, it's been Aaron Rodgers' fault. And everyone has been kind of looking it up and going, yeah, it's your fault, dude. And he hates it. And that's when all of that stuff, with the, I'm going to retire. Maybe I'm not going to retire. I'm going to go do some ayahuasca. Now I'm going to go do a darkness retreat. All of this media charades, it all started when everyone started to point the finger at Aaron. And he still had, and I think that's why he does these sort of things. I think that's why he's like, well, you think it's my fault? Okay, I'm going to leave you in limbo for a while. And then you're going to come crawling back to me because you're going to realize that Jordan Love isn't half the quarterback I am, which we all believe is to be true. But here's what I'm going to say. Now, there's a roundabout way of saying this. The Washington Commanders are in desperate need of a quarterback. They just put in Eric Bieniemy as the assistant head coach and offensive coordinator. They've already said there's going to be a promotion in the wings for him. Now, here's what I believe to be true. The Commanders have some really good weapons. They've got two very capable backs, just like in Green Bay. Terry McLaurin and I believe there was who's the other Samuel? Is it Curtis Samuel or Asante Samuel? So one of those. I think it's Curtis. They've got two really, really good receivers. If they go out into the draft and they draft Mike Mayer or they draft a tight end, they've got a really capable tight end coming in, and they've got a great defense. This was a 7-8 win team last year, 8-1 actually, and they had Taylor Heineke and Carson Wentz last year. This is a really good team. There's no pressure whatsoever in Washington right now. None. They're just happy. They're going to have Eric Bieniemy as their head coach going forward, which he will get that job when Ron Rivera retires next year. He's got one more year. He's going to learn the culture, learn the system, show what he's got, and then he'll be named the head coach. Aaron Rodgers could easily go in and just say, look, this is where I decided to end my career. There's no pressure. No one's going to be like, oh, Aaron's got to be great, because they're happy with where they're at right now. If they could land Aaron Rodgers, it would be like Jesus Christ coming back down from heaven to visit the earth again on Armageddon and to save the people. So that's exactly where I think Aaron Rodgers could end up and be in a really good position to win games and go to the playoffs.
That's a good spot. I'll give you that one. I follow. I'll give you that. It
was a long-winded response, but I thought of that very carefully. And no one is talking about the Commanders right now, which I believe is insane. I mean, we are looking at a team with a brilliant defense, a well-crafted offense, has some really nice pieces. The only thing they're missing is the quarterback. And no one is talking about the Commanders. Why? Because they can't go out and draft somebody. And who's going to want to end up in free agency there? There's not a lot of high commodity guys. Lamar Jackson was there briefly in conversation with that, got squashed. Justin Fields has been in the conversation about going to the Commanders. They're one quarterback shy of being a really good playoff team. And if Aaron Rodgers goes there, that's a 10, 11 win team. Easy.
That was well done. That I got to give
Thank
you.
you.
I
Appreciate it.
got to give you that one. I mean, I think, yeah, no, I mean the Taylor Heineke and that thing. I mean, I think it only ends up being if it's like, oh well, let's just suck for one more year and hope for a better quarterback in the draft. But
No, their team's too good. Their team is too talented. They've got a number one receiver. They've got a legitimate number two. They've got two very good backs, probably one of the top 5 best duos of backs in the league. I'd probably put it at 4 or 5, but it's definitely up there. That's a really, really good team that no one wants to talk about because they have Taylor Heineke. For a long time, they were leading the division. They had won like what was it, 6 games in a row? They were on fire.
I said that they were going to be better last year just based off of their defense. So
Yeah, well, and their defense is very good, especially now that they're going to get Chase Young back. He's their leading edge rusher. So this is going to be a really good team. All right, let's move on to our final guy. The guy that now everyone believes has played his final game in a Ravens uniform, Mr. Lamar Jackson, who the Ravens are $100 million off of the asking price that he's looking for. Quinn, where does Lamar play next season?
I've got 2 places. I think the best option, and I think the one that he would probably have the best results in, and it would be the most entertaining and the most fun thing ever, and that is the Atlanta Falcons. Second, I think there is just an even swap to be made, and he just goes to Chicago. You can even swap it. The Bears can pay him his money. They can then bring in a lot of other weapons that they can then pay, and the Bears could not only win now, but the Bears could basically leverage that first overall pick. They could leverage that pick by trading back twice to easily get 4, 5, maybe even 6 draft picks, both this year and next year, off of one pick if that were to happen. So I think the Atlanta situation would take 4 picks. It would take a first and a second this year and a first and a second next year. But he and Kyle Pitts in that dome would be absolutely incredible. You wouldn't have to worry about any type of weather situations. It's a cool, crisp 72 degrees. They would be complete lovers of it. It's the Michael Vick 2.0. It's the MVP. It's the guy who just needs a little bit. And what? For nothing? I mean, you can throw Desmond Ridder in there if you want to take those second rounds. You can give him 2 first and Desmond Ridder. You can give him a first and a second and Desmond Ridder. You can package a lot of things to make that happen. I think Atlanta's the best spot. I think Atlanta's the spot that would be pretty cool to happen because they also play in the NFC South. And if he ends up there, not only are they then the immediately favorite to win that division and make it to the playoffs, they are then only a couple pieces away from being a very viable team. And so they go from this team that has been kind of, on the downturn since their whole 28-3 choke. This would be the best option for them. But
well, go ahead. Don't finish.
Those are my 2. I'm just saying, those are my 2. Those are the easiest things because I think the Jets could do that same trade. I think the Dolphins could find a way to do the same thing. The Colts could do the same thing. Like there's a lot of teams that could do that. But I'm talking best fit scenario, best option. We've already seen it before. The franchise in Atlanta would literally be signing Mike Vick 2.0.
They would. They totally would. And I'll give you this. It is a really exciting thought. Kyle Pitts is probably salivating at the thought of Lamar Jackson coming down there because he hasn't. I mean, Kyle Pitts was this prototype, right? When he came out in the draft, everyone was like, "Oh my God, Kyle Pitts! What is 6'4", runs a 4.3, and he's a tight end. He's got size. Like this is every tight end coach's dream, head coach's dream to have someone out there like this. He's Travis Kelce, but faster. Like it's just amazing. And then, of course, he gets drafted by the Falcons. Matt Ryan can't get him the ball because Matt Ryan can't move, and he's getting hit all over the place. And then Marcus Mariota comes in, and he can move, but he can't distribute the ball either. So Lamar Jackson would be the perfect fit in Atlanta. But here's what I'm going to say. He's not going to play for the Ravens next year. I think that's out the window. I think that door finally got closed. I think the Ravens were like, look, with your injury history, with you moving around too much, the way you play is just too dangerous for us. We can't offer you all that guaranteed money. We can offer you this, but we can't offer you this. So if you can't accept that, we're going to have to move on. He won't play for the Ravens next year, but I don't think he's going to go to or want to go to Chicago. So what do I think happens? I think Lamar takes a year off. I think Lamar sits back. He gets his body right. He works out, makes sure he's completely healthy. He's still very, very young. What is he, 25, 26 years old? He still has at least 5 or 6 years of his prime left. What's one more year to just sit back and wait? Now, if he doesn't take a contract, how much guaranteed money is he getting right now from the Ravens? Do we know that number? Ballpark?
Nothing. It's going to be about 100. He wants 200, and the reason Kyler Murray got 100 million guaranteed. Kyler Murray is not near the quarterback that Lamar Jackson is.
Correct.
Deshaun got all guaranteed money. And for what Deshaun wants, yes, their playoff resume is the exact same at this point, but still Deshaun's regular season's number are not anywhere in the same realm of Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is the better one. So you compare directly to those two, and that's why he's saying, I want $200 million. I'm better than Kyler Murray. I'm better than Deshaun. I give you the best viable option. And at this point, they would have to give him the exclusive franchise tag. He would be paid $45 million for this next year. And then if comes into the same situation, so in Lamar's case, it would be kicking the can down the road, winding up in the exact same situation again next year after the exclusive franchise tag. He would have gotten $45 million. And if he gets dinged up at all, by the time it gets to the end of the year, he's going to say, I'm not risking it. I have no guaranteed money going forward. I'm not going to do that. But then that can then get kicked down the road again, and it then would be $55 million next year and $79 million on a if he continued to just be
correct
signed that way.
Now, well, so I'll go back and say this.
That number starts at 45, and I think that's where they're off. But it's like
before Deshaun got into that massive trouble off the field, there was he remember he sat out, right? Because he was like, we're completely off with our contract negotiations. I'm okay with just sitting back. I'm okay with letting you guys suck. And that's basically what happened. And then all this off the field stuff happened. And then it was the legal battle. So it just got pushed. I think Lamar looks at it and says, I'm going to pull a Deshaun. I'm just going to sit back. Hey, you guys think you can get it done without me? Go play a Tyler Huntley. Let's see what he does for you. Well, let's actually look back and see what he did for you when I was off the last 6 games of the season or 5 games of the season. Oh, wait, you guys went 2-3 and bounced the first round of the playoffs. So I'm not saying that Tyler Huntley can't ball. He's a great backup, but that's what he is. He's a backup. He's not a starting quarterback. So Lamar is probably looking at it like, I don't need to play football next year. Someone's going to buy me out next year. Someone's going to give me what I'm asking for. And if it's not this year and the Falcons say, hey, look, if the Falcons call them and say, we don't have the cap space right now, what do you say you wait a year? We clear up some spaces. We trade some pieces away. We suck for 1 more year. We go get you. And then we have all these draft picks to build around you. We can go out next year, get you all the pieces you want, and we are viable starting next year. It's not a bad idea. I don't think he wants to go play in Chicago because Chicago, he's looking at it and going, Chicago still has no idea what they're doing. They need all the help that they can get. I know they've got the money and the space to do it, but they don't got the weapons that I want. Because when Lamar goes out, remember, it's about the money right now, but when he goes out, he's a baller. Like, he wants to win games. It's not about, just his money and just getting his money. That's what it's about right now. But when he's out on that field, it's all about winning. And Chicago doesn't have that legacy right now. So I don't think he wants to go to Chicago. I know Atlanta's had the same problems, but the way Lamar looks at it, and I think you're right with Atlanta, is I get to play in a dome. I'm from the South. He's from Florida. I'm from the South. I'm playing in warm weather climate some other games during the year. I'm playing Carolina. I'm playing Tampa. I'm playing New Orleans. I'm playing in the South the entire year, basically, with the exception of what? Maybe 3 to 4 games total. So the way Lamar's looking at it, he's in a pretty good spot right now. You don't want to give me my money? Fine. I'll sit back. I'll get healthy. I'll take a year off. I'll come back next year and we'll shove it down your throat.
Yeah, I hear you.
All right. So
Atlanta
those are
the Bears.
Yep. Those are, well, speaking of the Bears. So obviously the Bears have the number 1 overall pick. This is our next topic. And briefly, we can get into this because we spent a lot of time on our free agency talk. So there's been a lot of speculation last, I'm going to say week and a half, that the Bears are very interested in trading Justin Fields and keeping the number 1 overall pick, getting some other positions, and drafting Bryce Young. So where do you believe this, let's go with percentage wise. Is this a 100% Bears are going to be doing this? Is this a 0%? Where do you see the likelihood percentage wise the Bears trade Justin Fields?
I think it's becoming more and more likely as the days kind of progress in terms of some of the other conversations that are going on based on the how much can we get for that first overall pick? Because at some point, people are kind of starting the conversation around, well, how good is Bryce Young going to be? How good is CJ Stroud going to be? How good is Will Levis? Like, how good are these top tier guys that are coming out this year versus the next year, or versus the Derek Carr on the market, Aaron Rodgers on the market, Jimmy G on the market? Like, there's enough guys that are out there on the market that you go, do we want to take a risk and take someone? I mean, Bryce Young is so undersized. I think it is Kyler Murray 2.0 waiting to happen. Like, he's not in my top 5 in terms of players in like to take in this draft because of that issue right there. He's a guy that played at Alabama. He's a guy that hasn't had to deal with any type of pressure or any type of real quarterback windows that happen in the NFL. And he's undersized. The undersized factor definitely comes to play, and we see it in every single time, every single season in the NFL. It's like Kyler Murray, still hurt, going to miss a lot of this season. Lamar Jackson isn't as big as the others. And it's like Justin Fields, to some credit, is a good size, but he's not big. Like, the guys who end up being slightly undersized, and when you get hit more often, which is inevitably going to happen, especially if he ends up in Chicago, that's not going to be a good carryover. Just he realistically is not big enough. He's not big enough just fully straight up. And then secondly, he's not a hyper athlete like Kyler Murray is to, try to get outside the pocket and make plays and do whatever else. So I think also, to the credit of some of the stuff that Justin Fields said about how he doesn't want to, he hates playing in the cold. He's a guy from Georgia. Like, he's a Southern guy. He's not really trying to be in a cold climate. And now the fact of him mentioning that and saying that, I think it's only now they're becoming more and more at wits with each other. And at the end of the day, the Bears' new GM didn't bring in Justin Fields. So he's like, I really could kind of care less if we do have him or not. And you're now looking at Eberflus. Eberflus was brought in. He was not, drafting Justin Fields. So it's, hey, 2 guys who both aren't the ones who said, yes, we want this guy. Now, if they come together and say we want Bryce Young, I think it's a mistake, because I don't think Bryce Young's the guy. But there is more than enough that they can do this year with this draft, moving the number 1 pick and moving Justin Fields. They can get substantially better. They can easily get 4 top draft picks plus moving off Justin Fields and getting a viable piece. Like, that's the position the Bears are in. The Bears are in a perfect position from every single angle. They've got the top draft pick. They've got a ton of cap space. They got cap space for the next few. Like, they have every single option that they need open. They have a quarterback who's good and has upside, but at the same time is not upside enough to really give them the best security in the world. They can move off if they have to. Any team could call and they should be able to answer everything. Like, they can put together an absurd amount of packages and get out of it. And it's their best choice. Like,
Well, so you bring up a lot of good points. I'm going to say that this is looking more like 30% they're going to trade him, 70% they're not going to trade him. I think this is a lot of smoke and mirrors. I think they're hyping up the idea. I think they're leaking little tiny things here and there. I bet you what is going on right now is that GM Ryan Poles called up Justin Fields and he said, I want you to be as vague as possible when talking about what you expect from the Bears, what you want from the Bears, without actually saying anything bad about this. And we're not going to say anything bad about you, but we're going to leak little rumors here and there. We're kind of interested. We're going to talk. We're going to take conversation. We're going to take phone calls. I think this is exactly what they need to do to gas up that number one overall pick. I don't think they're trading Justin Fields. What I think they're going to do is they're going to call and they're going to make it look like we're very interested in perhaps maybe moving off of Justin Fields. But if you really want Bryce Young, what are you going to give us? And I think that's what they're looking at right now. So they're going to say, well, hey, Bryce Young's looking mighty tasty. Probably had a really great, he's probably going to have a really great combine. And I'm going to get into Bryce Young in a second, but I think that's exactly what the Bears are trying to do. They're trying to juice up Bryce Young as much as they can. So when the time comes for the Colts or the Falcons or the Panthers or the Texans to say, yep, we're biting, that's the guy, the Bears are going to say, great, here you go. Here's Bryce Young. We'll take 2, we'll take 4, and we'll take players, draft picks, whatever. Let's look at Bryce Young, though, from this standpoint. Justin Fields is bigger, has a better arm. He's more mobile. He's faster. He knows the offense, and he's had more game experience than Bryce Young. What does Bryce Young have over Justin Fields? He's a better pure passer of the football. I'll give you that. I'll give you that right now. He's a better pure passer of the football than Justin Fields. He's got better mechanics. He throws a better spiral. He knows how to read defenses better. Absolutely. But you mean to tell me you want to replace a 6'3", 225-pound mobile QB who would have broken the single season rushing record for a quarterback to get a guy in who's barely 6 foot? He's probably not even. He's more like 5'10", 5'11", 190 pounds, who can't move nearly as well behind that offensive line with those weapons. Good luck. Good luck. You might have a worse team. You might have a worse team than you did this year.
That is very true. I'm in agreement. I don't think Bryce Young is the guy. Like, that's I think the Bears' smartest play is you can easily move off the first and you can trade back with either, depending on how much the Texans are, but I think they're in an interesting situation. But I think the Colts become the first decent option that they would willingly give up. So you swap first. So you go from first to fourth. You would easily get another first and then probably a second that year and maybe a second in a following year. So we're talking about 4 picks for one. At worst, 3 picks for one. And you go from 1 to 4 and you have another pick in that same draft and you have 2 more very good picks. Like, they have an option then to also be able to trade back from the 4 spot. Then you start getting into, all right, we're now moving off the 4. And by moving off the 4, we're getting another 2 or 3 picks. And now you're looking at, you just went from 1 player drafted to 7 actual players that should be able to play as not just as a starter in the league, but a guy that is on the roster going forward for multiple years and will see the field. That is what the Bears have the option to do. They can get 7 very young, talented guys in 7 different spots. You can pick 4 different spots and get depth, but the Bears have an option to literally be able to completely fix, all based off of 2 trades that they can make based purely off the first pick.
there's plenty of options and plenty of routes that you can go. And I will give you this, with the 8 rookies that we started last year, plus the draft picks that we're going to acquire and the people we drafted this year, we are 2 to 3 years away from having one of the most stacked rosters in the NFL. Probably if we hit on the guys that we're supposed to hit on, and this is going to take a lot of evaluation, it's going to take a lot of scouting, and it's going to take a lot of understanding what players fit in the system that you want to run, right? If you can do all of those things correctly, you are looking at a top 5 roster in the NFL within 2 to 3 years. Now, here's the question. If you were to draft Bryce Young, one of the things that I'm hearing constantly is, well, you can put size on him, right? And you can jack him up a little bit. You can get him 15, 20 pounds of muscle. Here's the problem with bulking up. You slow down. And one of Bryce Young's traits, one of his strengths, is his mobility. But he's not nearly as mobile as Justin Fields or Kyler Murray, for that fact. He's not even close to as fast as those two guys are. So if you put size on a guy that's already supposed to be not nearly as fast as these two, you're only slowing him down and making him less mobile. That still doesn't change the fact that he's not 6 foot. like you can't grow. You can't make him grow. You can't put like chia seeds on him and go chia and just watch it grow. So this is a situation that I believe the Bears have to see this out for one more year with Justin Fields. Now, here's the good news. If you put the pieces around Justin Fields this year, right, you go get him a number 1 wide receiver, and get him a little bit more depth at the receiver position, a better defense, a better offensive line, a couple more offensive line pieces. And you're looking at it and say, okay, this might not be the best roster, but this is a top 15 roster. Justin, you have to be the quarterback that everyone believes you can be, or that you've claimed that you can do with your legs, with your arm. You've got to take the next step. You've got to be Jalen Hurts this year. If that doesn't happen, great. Go out next year. Find a guy like Jimmy G, find a guy like Kirk Cousins, who's going to be coming off the end of his deal. Go get a guy that can just distribute the football. Brock Purdy, for example. I mean, guys that can literally just don't make mistakes. Go out and get a guy that's not going to be over the top 300 yards, but a guy that can go out and get Derek Carr. I mean, you won't, but get a guy like that. And I promise you, you're not only a playoff team, but if you've got the pieces around you and you build that defense back up, you're looking at potentially contending for a Super Bowl.
Agreed, but not. I agree with, yes, the roster can be very good if they make the right moves. They can, like I said, it would be essentially, if they were to move back twice, they essentially could have 7 guys that would be starters or guys who would see a sizable amount on the field if they're the right guys. If Justin doesn't work, I wouldn't then go get a veteran guy. I would then look at bringing in a young quarterback and trying to find a young guy, because then you just extend the life of all of those guys that you just drafted. Because that way, if all of them really start to hit, you'll be able to pay them and be able to continue to have this good pay plan where going forward, it's not going to be, oh, we're tied up by like an Aaron Rodgers contract where he is getting $50 million a year. And so it's like, okay, let's take this young talent and let's continue to build with it. And we would rather bring in some veteran guys outside, but then continue to have it explode. And that's exactly what the Chiefs have done. So that's kind of the realm of, hey, we got it done. We traded away a couple. We're now going to rebuild and bring and elevate the talent. And so it's like, oh, our talent's already there. Okay, let's just keep raising the talent level now. Okay, let's raise it again.
I've got an interesting theory here. And just stick with me for 1 second. I'm going to kind of get through this quick. What if the Bears draft Bryce Young? But they draft him, they call up the Colts, and they say, congratulations, we drafted Bryce Young for you. We're going to trade him to you right now. Give us the 4th. Give us Michael Pittman, and you can have him. We're going to take him off your hands. We're going to make sure that the Houston Texans don't get Bryce Young. We're going to make sure that he is 100% yours. We're going to draft him with the first overall pick, but you're going to give us the fourth, and you're going to, if no one's sold on draft day and no one's like, we're not entirely sure, we think you're bluffing, Chicago, you draft Bryce Young, you call someone up, you say, take him. Hell, you could freaking call Atlanta. You could call Atlanta. You can call one of those teams that has no shot to get CJ Stroud or Bryce Young. You could call the Commanders and say, hey, we've got Bryce Young for you. What are you going to give us? Oh, we can give you XYZ. That could be a move of leverage that the Bears can operate on. And they say, look, we draft the player and we go get picks and players from around the league that maybe we weren't able to get simply because we drafted this kid and we're just shipping him off.
Yeah, it could work. I mean, it ends up being the same of before and after. Yeah, it does still come down to draft day. That's when the move's going to be made, most likely.
Correct. All right. Final, speaking of draft day, final thing, 5 minutes, not even. Best player in the draft. Obviously, the combine is 7 days away. We have seen a lot of really studded defensive players. There's some good offensive linemen that are going out. Obviously, we have the 3 quarterbacks. So let's just go with, in your opinion, usually the best player in the draft can be kind of limited to the top 10, top 11 picks. Who do you believe is the best player in this draft?
I go back and forth between Jalen Carter, Will Anderson, and Myles Murphy. It's 3 defensive guys that played at 3 of the top colleges. You've got Jalen Carter at Georgia. You got Myles Murphy from Clemson, Will Anderson Jr. from Alabama. Of those 3 guys, it just kind of depends on the day. Jalen Carter is not really much of a volume guy. He's not going to get you a bunch of tackles during the game, but he draws attention every single snap. Myles Murphy, big dude, 6'4", 275. Will Anderson, same thing. 6'6", he's the smaller of the bunch, 6'3", 245, and quick as can be. And so it's like, it just kind of depends on which you really want. But I mean, I'd probably stick with Jalen Carter just based on the fact of being an interior D lineman. He can cause a lot of havoc. He can cause a lot of problems. He can stuff the run game. He can draw a lot of attention. He makes it easier for edge rushers. You run a couple stunts. You get him on the outside coming from the one side, pulling around a guard, not paying attention, now coming right up the center. Yeah, it's that's a scary tactic. But my top 5 in the way that I have it laid out: Jalen Carter, Will Levis, Myles Murphy, Tyree Wilson, and Will Anderson. Those are my 5. All 5 of those guys will work out. The only one, Will Levis, it's only going to depend on which team he ends up with. If he ends up with a completely disorganized franchise, it's not going to work. I think his floor is Andy Dalton. I think his ceiling is a Joe Flacco. You have to remember, Joe Flacco did win a Super Bowl. Like, he did have 2 really good seasons. He's not elite, but he was pretty good. He cracked inside the top 10 that season. Like, he's a good enough size. He's good enough athletically. He's not anything crazy. He played at Penn State for 2 years. He then played at Kentucky for 2 years. Pro system, game speed. Get him a decent running back. Get him a couple decent receivers. Time in the pocket. He played like, I'm not going to do the Lamar thing because it's like playing at a smaller university is actually a huge plus for him. Like, the Penn State thing was just fine. He sat there, understood. Then playing at Kentucky, you're playing with guys. It's a basketball school, not a football school. So when you get to the league, that talent gets elevated. I think he's in enjoyment of that elevation. But those are my 5. Like, hey, the 4 for sure. The 4 defense, they're going to work at every team. It's just right. Which one do you want? I mean, correct. The best one that I think out of all of them and is further down on everybody's list, but Tyree Wilson is 6'6", 275 coming off the edge. Like, what?
It's scary. I mean, these edge rushers, they just seem to be these monster figures. I'm going to say, from a pure talent standpoint, the ability to be the best at your position, the answer is Will Anderson. His junior season led the league, in college football with 21 sacks. 21 sacks. Now, that's unbelievable in and of itself. Offenses got smarter, and they said, well, hey, we're going to double him, next year. We can't allow 21 sacks. Being doubled almost every single play, Will Anderson still had like 13 or 14 sacks this year. Like, we are looking at a ceiling Khalil Mack and, in my opinion, a floor of a guy like, right now, Kayvon Thibodeau, like what he is right now, like a guy that's, he goes out and he's going to get you a 7 or 8 sack. Like that's what I'm looking at. Like, not a huge difference maker, but a guy that's still a really nice piece that you have to look out for. Like, this kid's going to be a Pro Bowl level edge rusher. He's got everything going for him. He's got size. Maybe he's not the biggest, but he's got size. He's got speed. He's got strength. He is just unbelievable. I know Jalen Carter is a run stuffer, but I see him more like I see a Fletcher Cox, a guy that, like, hey, he's great to have on the line because he can stuff the run, but I don't see him as a pressure the quarterback guy. Maybe 4 to 5 sacks per year, which is still pretty good, but he's not a rush the quarterback or power his way through. He's just a big presence. He's a big hulking presence. And he's had some issues off the field. He's been pretty immature. We've seen some things that maybe haven't intrigued a lot of franchises, saying, well, hey, do you really have your act together? But nonetheless, he is a really good football talent. And I'm going to mention this lastly before we take off. When you mentioned Will Levis, I like the the floor of Andy Dalton. I like the ceiling of Andrew Luck. And here's why I say it. Andrew Luck came out and was so polished from the moment that he sat in the pocket for the Colts. And who else ran a pro-style system? Stanford, when Andrew Luck was there. Small school, just like Will Levis. Will Levis has the advantage, though, of playing some of the best talent in college football in the SEC. So if you put Will Levis, like you said, in the right situation, if you draft him to a team like Carolina, who's got a decent offensive line, some decent pieces, if you draft him to Atlanta, who's got some decent pieces, wherever he goes, if he's got a couple of weapons, a capable offensive line, and a pretty good defense, you may be looking at a rookie of the year candidate for sure. I say ceiling in the highest sense possible. I don't mean ceiling like, well, if he's good, he's Andrew Luck. I mean, like, if we're talking about the highest that he could get, it's probably Andrew Luck. The lowest is Andy Dalton, but I think it's going to be somewhere right in between. I think you're looking at a guy that at best probably can win 11, maybe 12 games max.
Yeah, that's why I kind of like the Joe Flacco thing. Like, he was slight, like, in terms of being better than Andy Dalton, just based on the fact of they made it to the playoffs quite a few times, having won a Super Bowl. Like, but it really wasn't entirely Flacco that won that Super Bowl. Like, you have to remember how good all the other pieces around him were, but he got the job done. And Andy Dalton took the Bengals to the playoffs multiple times. And he's a comparable guy, especially early in his career. He's not as good now, but middle of the pack guy. I don't think Will Levis is going to come into the league and people are going to be like, oh, you got to watch out for Will Levis this week, man. It's like, no, you still have Justin Herbert and the Prince and Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow. And even to this credit right now, I don't think he would eclipse Kirk Cousins or Dak Prescott for a couple years.
Let's throw out another name here that kind of similarly, like
Ryan Tannehill.
Ryan Tannehill. That's exactly what I was going to say. Ryan Tannehill. If he can be Ryan Tannehill, that's a team that can win the division, like wherever he decides to go. So
that's all you need.
he's not going to be this. I think you're right. He's not going to be this guy that's like, oh my God, 345 yards, 4 touchdowns. Who is this Will Levis kid?
Yeah.
But he's going to be a guy that's like, hey, Will Levis had a pretty good game. 210 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, completed 67% of his passes. It's pretty good.
100%. That's the guy, but
it was a good show. It was a really good show.
I have to see.
Well, so here's the good news. The draft, like I said, is 2 months away, but the combine is coming up here in just 1 week. Actually, I believe it is 1 week from today that the combine starts. So there are going to be people, including myself, glued to the television, waiting to see physicals, waiting to see benches, waiting to see 40-yard dashes, waiting to see drills that were ran. And this is really I don't think it shows off football ability, but I do think it shows off athletic ability. And that's what you're looking for as the game transitions to a speed and athleticism sort of game. That's exactly what teams are going to be looking for, is who can, kind of outshine the other athletes in this combine. So it's going to be very interesting to watch. I'm really excited for it. This is Say It Like You See It. Remember, you can follow us wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow us on our social media. You can follow us on TikTok. You can follow us on Instagram. That's Say It Like You See It Pod. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. And like I said, everywhere you get your podcast, you can check us out. From Fond du Lac, Wisconsin and Fargo, North Dakota, this has been Say It Like You See It. My name is Trace the Moose Moustakis alongside Quinn, the Mighty Q Redmond. We'll have a good night and we'll see you on Friday.